Good morning, students. My name is Miss Marine, and today we are going to be talking about regular and irregular past tense verbs. What is a verb? A verb is a word that shows action of what someone or something is doing. Examples of this can be such as running, hiking, walking, ran. Strong action verbs make writing clear and exciting for the reader. That's why it's important that we include these things and learn this skill so that we can include it in our writing to keep the readers engaged. Our objective is, today I will practice forming and using regular and irregular past tense verbs using my doodle notes. What is a regular past tense verb? An action that has already taken place. Many past tense verbs are formed by adding ed. Right here we can see this example of the word learn, and when we add ed, it creates the word learned, meaning we have already learned this. However, sometimes you have to make another spelling change before adding the ed. If a word has a short vowel sound and ends with a single consonant like stop does, you double the consonant before adding the ed. In the word stop, we double the p and add ed, creating the word stopped. Sometimes you have to make another spelling change before adding the ed. If a word ends with a silent e, such as the word move, we drop the silent e before adding ed, creating the word moved. If a word ends with a y, such as hurry, we change the y to an I before adding ed. Now let's look at a couple examples. DeAndre studied earthquakes in class. What is the present tense form of studied? If you guessed study, you'd be right. How did the spelling of study change when ed was added? Any guesses? The y changed to an I before we add the ed. Now let's look at this example. In 1906, an earthquake ripped apart the city of San Francisco. Now ripped is the past tense verb. What is the present tense form of ripped? Rip. How did the spelling of rip change when ed was added? If you remember, we double the p before we add the ed, and that's how we get rip to change to ripped. The ground moved and cracked. What is the present tense form of moved and cracked? Move, crack. How did the spelling of move and crack change when ed was added? For move, we just add ad, or we remove the silent e and add ed. For crack, however, we simply have to add ed. A huge fire started after the earthquake. What is the present tense form of started? Start. How did the spelling of start change when ed was added? For this word, all we have to do is add ed. Now let's look at irregular past tense verbs. These can be a little trickier because there are no specific rules that we follow or patterns to change a word from present tense to past tense. So again, a past tense verb, even the irregular ones, are an action that has already taken place. They have completely different forms in the past tense which need to be learned and remembered. Down here we can see a few examples of irregular past tense verbs. In present tense we have do, come, and go, and in past tense they would be did, came, and went. Just using these examples, we can see, as I had stated before, that there are no patterns or rules that we are following when we are changing these words from present tense to past tense, which is why it is important that we remember them. In 1989, another earthquake shook San Francisco. What is the present tense form of shook? Shake. How did the spelling of shake change? To change shake to shook, we change the AKE at the end to OOK. Let's look at another one. The earthquake did a lot of damage. What is the present tense form of did? Do. You may remember this from the example we looked at when we first introduced irregular verbs. How did the spelling of do change? In this example, we change the O to ID to create the word did. Buildings and monuments fell down. What is the present tense form of fell? Fall. How did the spelling of fall change? The A is changed to an E to create the word fell. People felt the earthquake hundreds of miles away. What is the present tense form of felt? Feel. How did the spelling of feel change? We change it by taking the last E and L and changing them to LT, creating the word felt. Now take a few moments to look over these sentences. Read each sentence and decide which is the correct past tense spelling of the action verb in the parentheses. In a few moments, we'll go over these together. Now that you've had a moment to look over these, we'll read them aloud together and choose the correct spelling for the action verb in the parentheses. The 1906 earthquake started at 5:12 in the morning. For this, we had to add ed to the end of the word start. Number 2, people run ran, or ran out into the streets. Ran. People ran out into the streets. Number 3. Parents carried their children. In this example, we change the Y to an I, and then we are able to add ED. Number 4. Everyone raced for safety. For this example, we can either remove the E and add ED, or simply add D to create the word raced. I hope this lesson was helpful for you. Now you will go to the Writing Classroom in Seesaw and complete the Google Form task cards.